we are very lucky to have found that lichen hobby, and we're live by the way now. Andrew, how you doing?
Yes, doing well. Although now I'm a little wistful for the notion of a spouse who would share my passion for baseball tourism the way yours shares for golf
Yeah,
tourism. But
yeah. See, there is a trade off. There is a trade
which
off.
is
My wife hates when I say football. Living in England, she hates. Well, she hates kind of sport in general. Golf, as she's gotten into, but she hates watching the football here. So the England
well,
are in the finals of the
we
Euros.
talked about this before though. But
Yeah.
what she really hates is the hooliganism, right?
Well, she hates everything about it. She hates that there is a um what's the word? So she hated growing up that there was an expectation that she supported a football team, and if you didn't, you were ostracized. And she hates anything that is sort of like everybody likes it, but she thinks it's shit. So she hates
So she's a
football
contrarian. Is that what it is?
yeah. Any footballer is a hooligan, and that's her point of view.
What does she think
She
of the
doesn't want
monarchy?
anything to do with it. Fine, he likes it, loves the
Oh,
monarchy.
really?
Most
I feel
people
like
do.
a lot of
Yeah.
people. That's what the thing, though. I'm thinking most people do. So maybe she's like, "Now the monarchy's shite."
Yeah. Yes.
Adopting British.
She doesn't. Yeah, no, but there's not many people that think that you get more political younger people that are anti-monarchy. But most people here are very traditional. Most people are very traditional, and it's a piece of living history, really.
Right, it's
And
national pride and all that.
Yeah, it's an institution, and I think I'd say the vast majority of people are very into the royal family here. Not very into them, but they're fine with it. And then you have, I'd say, a smaller cross section of people that want to just stop giving them money. But there's a whole conversation that goes around the royal family as far as how much money they bring into the country, yada yada yada, which is for another show.
What if one of them were to commit a homicide in a parking lot in a convenience store in Jacksonville? Would that change?
You are a professional, my friend. That was the greatest segue in YouTube history.
I'm telling you.
So yeah, if the royal family committed a murder, and this is what we're talking about today, the Michael Dunn murder. And Andrew, if you'll indulge me, I'll get everyone caught up who hasn't been familiar with this story.
Yes.
So over the last week, Dixon and I have been watching the interrogation tapes from the Michael Dunn loud music murder. And to paint a picture, I think it was November of 2013, watching the wedding of his son Michael Dunn and his.
It was 2012.
2012. Michael Dunn and his fiance had to get back to their hotel room a bit early. They had a new little puppy named Charlie that was staying back at the bed and breakfast. And on their way back, the partner says, "I want to get a bottle of white wine." Michael Dunn said, "Yeah, no worries, honey."
And some chips. Don't forget.
And some chips. That's right. Some potato chips. Pulls into the parking lot of I forget the name of the gas station, and pulls into.
I have to interject here because as a lifelong Pennsylvania resident, which you were before you defected, the very notion that you could pull into a gas station and get a bottle of white wine and a bag of chips is the most Florida Jacksonville good Lord thing. I think
that to me that's modern living to me, because in Britain you can get like a bottle of whiskey at a services, at a motorway services, at a rest stop. I guess I'm trying to remember my American to English. So I think Florida's ahead of the curve there with the rest of the country.
Well, Pennsylvania is giving in. Like, it's more and more. There's I was at a convenience store the other day, and I think Wawa maybe is starting to do it too, although I haven't noticed it at Wawa, where you can buy individual cans of beer. I don't think there's no whiskey that's still controlled by the state liquor store system. But anyway, I'm sorry. Just saying that sentence out loud for someone who grew up in the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and still lives here. It's still just the idea, like, let's stop at the gas station, get a bottle of wine and a bag of.
Well, I'll tell you what, I've lived in Ohio.
That is one hell of a cocktail party right there.
I've lived in Ohio, and I've left the state, and I have seen some shit. And you know what? There's a whole nother world out there outside of Pennsylvania.
Listen, I'm not untraveled. I've been, of course, to your country, and I've visited 25 or 26 of the other states. So I'm aware that it happens. But to me, it's still a novelty, not like an everyday decision. Anyway.
And I would say for Rhonda, the fiance, I don't know if that was an everyday decision. When I listened to her testimony, there was a lot of alcohol in her day-to-day life. So she may have frequented a gas station or two for a bottle of wine, not in a bad way. I don't think she was somebody who was ridiculous, just like anybody else really likes wine.
Right.
Just to pick up with the story, they pull in next to a Dodge Durango with 4 gentlemen in it, 17, 18-year-olds, one of which was in the shops, I think, getting gum. They were going to meet some girls, so they thought, we need to get some gum.
To get that Banaka or whatever.
And while she was in the shop, Michael Dunn rolls his window down, and according to Michael, politely says, would you mind turning your music down? As they were playing very loud rap.
Why certainly, sir.
Which actually the gentleman in the front seat said, yeah, fine, and rolled, turned the music down. Now in the back seat was Joshua Davis. Joshua Davis did not like
Jordan Davis.
I am such an asshole. Sorry to the Davis family. So Jordan Davis in the back seat just got real shitty about it and said, turn it back up. I'm not going to reiterate the words. I don't remember exactly what they were. And then he started swearing. Now, according to Michael Dunn, he heard him saying, I'm going to fucking kill that guy. And he rolls this down and says, are you talking to me? Which sounds a bit like of a,
Dirty
homage
Harry.
to, Dirty Harry. But the way he says it, it's, excuse me, sir, were you talking about killing me? Would you please tell me if you are, I would like to depart very quickly or get my gun out. He then I guess says that he pulls up a barrel, and we're going to go into this in a bit because we are going to deconstruct this case. And then he starts to come out of his car. Michael Dunn keeps a gun in his glove box or his glove compartment. He gets the pulls it out. It's holstered. He cocks it, turns around. Now the car is parked to his left. The kid that he's arguing with is in the back seat on the passenger side, so on his side, and then unloads. I think 3 shots to the back, 3 to the front, and then the car
4.
It was 4. It was a few. The car quickly starts backing up, turns around, and as it's driving away, Michael gets out of his car to stop what he said is blind fire from the gun that he thought they had, and fires another 3 rounds into the back of the car, 2 or 3, something to that effect. In the melee, his partner comes out. He says, "Get in the car." And they just head to the B&B, not calling the police. The young guys come back in because they've realized one of their friends is shot and call 911. And eventually, sadly, Mr. Davis passes away. I think he even died on the scene. Eventually, the next day, the Michael Dunn finds out that the kid that he shot at died. He thought he just shot at the car. And by the time he had gotten back home, which was about 2 hours away from Jacksonville, the police were on their way, and he was arrested. And that's where we pick up our story.
Can I now? I want to say right off the bat, just listening to this story, and something that I hadn't really thought about, as I'm listening to it unfold, in piecemeal, sort of. But right off the bat, his story is ridiculous on its face, and here's why. I'm parked in my car. I've rolled down my window for the second time, and now I'm saying, excuse me, was that comment about murdering someone directed at me?
Pardon me, sir.
And apparently the person across the way, according to me, confirms that it was, yes, indeed, I am considering murdering you, sir. And that, in fact, I now see a barrel that becomes visible to me. At this point in his story, I'm looking back and behind me, and that's when I see the flash of the barrel. And then I think to myself, it looks like I now have a fight or flight decision to make. I guess I'd better reach for my own weapon so as to defend myself. Now I'm reaching across to the glove compartment, opening the glove compartment, pulling the gun out, now turning back around to fire my shot. By the time I've done all that, if I saw the barrel, I'm already, and it was really there, I'm already shot. Or, there's already something happening. So the time it took him to go,
Yeah.
Should the fact that nothing happened other than his own shooting in that space of time should have told him either there was no gun or there was no imminent threat or something. But anyway.
And that's what the prosecutor was I guess referring to in part of the trial, because I listened to quite a lot of the trial, and the prosecutor in that case was making the point that so in the time that you saw the barrel and then made the decision to get your gun. You got your gun, you unholstered it. It took him 2 seconds. I think they tested it. And by the time you turned around, he hadn't shot you. And he said, yeah, thank God. Which from that point, it's like, good, he didn't shoot me. Let me go ahead and just, shoot the hell out of their car. But if I can even take it a step back from there, I think when they pulled in, one of the things the prosecutor was mentioning was the fact that I think they interviewed somebody who had been there just ahead of Michael Dunn, and when he arrived, he made a decision, and he was one of the witnesses of the actual shooting. He made a decision to not park next to the young guys playing the music because the music was loud. He didn't want to kind of mess with that, and he parked somewhere else. Now, Michael Dunn admits that he doesn't like what he said was that rap crap, or according to his fiance, she said he called it that thug music. He hates it so much that he parks next to the Dodge Durango. And in testimony of eyewitnesses, there was quite a few spaces that he could have chosen from. It was a big parking lot that he had. So even before he gets to that point where he's saying, "Excuse me, sir, would you mind turning it down?" If he hated it that much, if the sound drove him crazy, which he said in multiple points of testimony, why did he choose to park at the space that is his even to the point where he couldn't open his car door? He was that close as a 6'4" guy. Why would you park near the thing you hate the most and then be surprised when there's a confrontation?
I think we know the answer. He was not surprised, and he was fishing for the confrontation. I mean, his story is just, it's obviously a lie. He's obviously, we've been over the fact that he'd had a few before getting there. He's feeling his oats or whatever. And, he's an angry white guy who for some reason decides this is the time, the day of his son's wedding, for heaven's sake, to pick this fight. And then pick it in such a not like let me pick a fight and take a swing at a guy because I'm drunk, but pick a fight, let me, and then take such a drastic and an action that has such a finality to it.
Yeah.
I mean, you wonder if he was sitting up the night before watching Dirty Harry or Death Wish or, whatever, priming himself for this type of a confrontation.
Well, this was a hobby they had because they mentioned, and the weird thing about the case and the way that, and I'm not a lawyer, a solicitor, but the way the defense unlaid its case or made a case for Michael Dunn, they made it a point to make sure that Michael Dunn spends his, weekends or monthly goes to the range. Rhonda was going to the range. His son was going to the range. So they had a love of guns, or to a certain
part
degree.
Of his defense.
This was part of his defense. So I don't know if they were trying to say he was capable with guns. But the other thing they were saying, which I found confusing, is the defense attorney on multiple occasions made it clear that to the young guys in the car, so to the friends of Jordan Davis. So what did Jordan Davis say? Could you hear it? Well, yeah, he didn't say anything threatening. How do you know he didn't say anything threatening if the music was so loud? Is it possible that maybe he said some things that you didn't hear? Now, one thing I pulled away from this trial, and credit to Jordan Davis's friends, they were very, very mature on the stand, and they weren't, it's very possible that we didn't hear something. But in saying that, when they were saying to his best friend who was sitting next to him in the seat, you may have missed something, does that not obliterate any argument that he heard Jordan Davis say, I'm going to fucking kill you, if the guy in the car couldn't hear him? And one of the other points to go on that, his friend in the front seat actually rolled his window up before the shooting because he's like, I think he thought, this is getting awkward, I'm just going to roll Jordan's window up. He's getting kind of hot-headed now. Rolled his window up to about 3 inches from the top when the shooting happened. So
trying, in other
think,
words, to avoid or put off the confrontation.
Yeah, but if he's making the argument that his friend next to him missed something or didn't hear, does that not just totally erase any argument that he heard him say, "I'm going to fucking kill you"? That's the threat.
So in other words, that the friend missed it, but that Michael Dunn didn't somehow.
Yeah, in another car with loud music, with the window up. How is he going to pick that out if he's making the argument the person next to him isn't hearing that or could be missing something? If I'm the prosecutor, I'm saying, okay, so if you agree that the person next to Jordan couldn't hear with the music being so loud, how you on a front seat of a car 3 feet, 4 or 5 feet away with a pane of glass between you and the music, how are you hearing this so definitively?
Yeah, I mean, you are speaking from an advantage here, in that I did not get a chance to look at the trial itself. But I mean, my inclination there. I mean, I'm not sure about, like you. I'm not a lawyer or a solicitor, so I'm not 100% sure about the rules about redirecting a witness after. Yeah. So I assume these kids would have been prosecution witnesses. This is a cross examination coming from the defense attorney. To what degree are you able to redirect? And what are the rules that limit redirection, for the prosecution to pick up additional questions after the defense's ability to cross? That I don't know. What I will say that I wouldn't. The defense attorney has a really difficult case here. I mean, to give him his due credit, right? I mean, there's no dispute. Like, the only thing you can argue is justification, right? I mean, there's no disputing any of the facts in terms of yes, Michael Dunn is absolutely responsible for firing the shots that killed Jordan Davis. So now you're really limited in what you can present if you're going to take this to trial. Yeah. And, so you're going to have to present some plausible narrative wherein justification. And Florida famously, and again, I think I mentioned this when we were on the air last time. I don't think you can really talk about this case without talking about Trayvon Martin, which had happened 10 months earlier, and and what the fear was, and I think this case proves that it was right to fear this, that it was like flashing a green, light at every would-be Dirty Harry, would-be Charles Bronson who wanted, and all these friggin' gun range rats who hang around gun ranges shooting up target, and practice target shooting with their handguns. I mean, that at least half of them, if not more, are in their minds, they're playing a little game where, they're in their mind, they're sitting there imagining that they're the hero, that they're the guy who walks in and stops the robbery, stops the, stops the rape, stops the this, stops the that. Yeah. You're fired. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Of course, if you're going to sit there and fire guns at like a human shaped target, or a target that has of course that's what you're pretending, right? Yeah. So you got a guy who's now basically got a fantasy in his mind. And so the defense attorney, I that's why I don't understand why. I don't think I would be all that interested, if I were the defense attorney, in presenting a lot of evidence about how much time my client spent at a gun range. Because to me, as a juror, now I know who this guy is. Yeah. I'd rather leave that sort of on the DL. Had he been to a gun range once? I can't deny it. So, if I put my client on the stand and the prosecutor asks, I'm going to have to, he's going to have to say yes. And then I'm going to try to downplay it, though, and say, was this your number one thing to do with your time? No. Why did you go to a gun range? Well, I do own a few handguns for both collection and protection. And if you're going to have them, you have to fire them occasionally. And there's only one safe way to fire them, to just make sure that they're in good working order. And then the only way to do that is to go down to a firing range, do it safely. It's not that I'm there every week, but whatever. I mean, I would try to downplay whatever I could. Apparently, his defense attorney took the opposite approach, or maybe he felt like he had to, let me get ahead of this before the prosecutor points it out. And so, okay, yeah, you go to the gun range, that's fine, right? But I'm trying to frame it somehow as that this means I know safe gun handling rules, and that
I'm guessing
I wouldn't. Use a gun unsafely, knowing all that. But the bottom line is to the point that you were making, the point that I don't think it's an unreasonable point for the defense attorney to try to raise, is that, all right, I'm sitting in this seat, the outside, the passenger side rear seat. my direction is focused out the window at somebody I'm having an argument with, and maybe I'm not speaking that loudly, and my voice is directed over here. And if there's music going in the car, and I'm in the seat next to him on the opposite side of the car, and I'm talking over here, maybe I didn't hear exactly what he said because of over the music. You know, I don't think that's an unreasonable point for him to try to get. I also think, you know, it's basically like, you know, it's like shooting a 3-ball from half court. You hope it goes in. It's not very likely, but you know.
Just, well, I think it's watching this, and I haven't watched many because I'm really starting to get into, you know, as we're covering these cases as part of this channel we're doing. And what I thought maybe we could do is I can just sort of unlay what I think the defense was trying to do and get your take on it. Yeah. So the building blocks, I think, of this case were very much about one, discrediting witnesses, which we don't have to go into. I think that's pretty much expected. But another thing they were trying to do was make a case. They actually were making a case that there may have likely been a gun in the back seat, a rifle. And I know we watched the interrogation where he was, you know, planted some seeds of doubt by the police, and he was like, well, maybe there wasn't, maybe there was something, some sort of a you know, something with a patina on it. Yeah, stick or something. So by the time the trial came around, the narrative was there was a gun, and the police did not do a good enough job in investigating where they could have dumped a gun, to the point that they were interrogating the boys who survived the shooting, questioning their timeline. Why didn't they just, you know, they pulled out, and what they had done is they pulled out and drove about 100 yards, give or take, into another parking lot. So there was a gas station that had, I think, a shared parking lot with like an outlet mall of some sort. And they pulled next to one of the shops, which is about 100 yards from the gas station. They got out sort of like, holy shit, we were just shot at. And they were starting to say, well, why didn't you call 911 from there? And, you know, starting to question, you know, the decision.
How long did it take them to call 911?
Well, but they ended up calling 911, and this is what they said. So here was how the defense, I guess, questioned, and this was the path it took. So did you call 911 when you stopped the first time? No, we were watching Michael Dunn pull out. We jumped out of the car. You know, the driver was asking, is everybody okay? They realized that Jordan was shot. He wasn't responding. And then they got back in the car and drove back to the gas station. Well, why did you do that? There was people there and we needed help. So when did you call 911? Well, what ended up happening was they got back, they jumped out, they said, somebody call 911. And then one of the guys did start calling 911. Another guy had a woman who was already there call 911. But they were even drilling one of the guys in the front seat and his best friend, saying, okay, did you ask anyone to call 911 before you got back to the gas station? Well, yeah, I asked the guy up front to call 911. Did he do it? No, he was really worried about Jordan. Well, did it bother you that he didn't call 911? And just really starting to pick holes into this timeline as far as how far were they from the gas station, with the idea that they could have dumped a gun. And then the police never spent any time investigating whether there was actually a gun. So if Michael Dunn sees there's a gun, why are we not investigating that? Why are we assuming he fired on them? And that was the general theme of one of the directions they were going. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, you know, on the one hand, again, the defense attorney is dealt a bad hand here. So he's pursuing the only plausible, defensible line he's got, which is that Michael Dunn is correct, that there was a gun, that in pulling to the next parking lot over, that somehow in the little bit of time that they were in that parking lot, did it come out? How long were they waiting in that parking lot?
Like, it was probably, I think it was only like 30 seconds. They jumped out, realized Jordan was shot, jumped back in, and their decision was to go back to the gas station. I'll give you my view on it in a bit. I'm just curious because this is all new to you.
Well, and I mean, like, again, I don't think they had room for a whole lot. And by the way, you know that there were 2 trials, right? This is Florida,
yeah,
for you, right? The first one was actually a hung jury.
Yeah. Well, for the murder, not for the attempted murder of 4 people. Right. The actual murder, he was, I guess the questionable piece to the jury would have been whether, and this was another piece too, and I think the most successful argument was whether there was a threat and whether Jordan Davis got out of the car. Because if he gets out of the car and advances, that makes it a little bit more complicated.
No, it really doesn't.
Well,
you still don't have a right to shoot him.
It doesn't get complicated for you or I, but it gets complicated from a put this guy in jail for the rest of his life scenario.
Well, okay. Well, murder. I mean, I assume that he was not convicted of murder. That means murder too. I assume, right?
So in the end, he was convicted because the second trial he was convicted of murder, and I was surprised. Not to jump too far ahead, we will double back to the case, but I was surprised at how long his sentence was. Not that I don't think he didn't deserve it. I think he 100% deserves it. I think he deserves every year he gets. But he was put away for 90 years with no chance of parole.
Yeah, I know he got a long sentence, and deservedly so. I mean, the reason why I'm asking the questions I'm asking is, like, as they say, one rule of being an attorney is you never ask a question to which you don't already know the answer.
Yeah.
And so what I'm sitting here wondering is, is it even plausible that there was a timing for them to have dumped a gun that was never recovered? If they go to this other lot, I mean, I guess of course the defense's position is going to be, well, see, since you didn't look for it, if they throw the gun like anywhere, all you had to do is look for it, but you didn't, and as a result, somebody found it, took it, and so, but they are still arguing the existence. I mean, basically on the evidence of Michael Dunn's testimony, this thing existed, and the sad part is, if Michael Dunn were a police officer, he might have gotten away with it.
Well, it's very possible,
right? Because people would say, "Oh yeah, if the police officer said there is a gun, then there must be one," despite the complete lack of evidence that any such thing existed.
Well, in this instance, I think part of the trial, one of the I guess conclusions the police came to, the forensics team, was given the timeline that they left and came back, and given where they said they went, and given the possible locations they could go in the time that they had left. There was no plausible place they could have dumped a long rifle without it being found at some point.
Oh, right, because he said it was a rifle, not just like a gun.
Yeah, he didn't say it was a handgun. It was he made it very clear it was a long barrel, a long rifle, something with a patina.
Right.
And he made that very clear. I think from my end, I would never want to be a defense attorney, and I have I'm of two minds with really good defense attorneys, because for us to be sure people are going to prison for the right reasons, you want the best possible defense, so that when you put somebody away, you know that they're guilty. And I find it frustrating at times to watch these guys drill these young guys who had just been shot at by their client, and questioning their decision making after they had, the better part of 8 bullets, whatever it was, 7 or 8 bullets fired at their car.
Sure,
and,
right.
These are 17, 18-year-old kids. And I think it's perfectly plausible what they've done and why they've done it. But I think the whole idea of the rifle isn't so much to get an outcome, but it's sowing seeds of doubt in the jury.
Well, right. Reasonable doubt is the standard, right?
Yeah. Because they were asking
this is something. Go ahead.
They were asking the police about, so what cameras did you look at? Why didn't you check every camera in the area? Why didn't we put a lot of resource into finding this gun that Michael Dunn says he's seen and still maintains he sees?
Yeah, I mean, again, that is the defense attorney's job, and it's an unpleasant job, I would think, because you're right. I wouldn't want to be a defensive. Although honestly, I'm more sympathetic in some. It really depends on the client. See, like, I'm not very sympathetic to Michael Dunn as a client. No. But if I had, even someone accused of something relatively nasty, but who, is poor, maybe grew up in poverty, has things that you can say, well, listen, I think the classic example, if you've ever heard Mike Tyson talk about his life, and how he got to be Mike Tyson. Yeah. And one of the things he talks about is how, like, he had a mentor who mentored him in how to burgle. You know what I mean? When he was like in his, like 8, 9, 10. Well, I mean, like, really, I mean, there are kids out there with existences and in childhoods that, you went away for a second, but all right. You'll come back. Sorry for the interruption. Anyone listening? There are people with childhoods that are,
I'm back. Sorry.
That's okay. I was just recovering my sentence as I.
There was existences. Yeah, sorry. Go right ahead.
Well, there are people who have childhoods that, people like you and myself and anybody who grew up in a reasonably middle class, or not even. It's not about class. It's about parents with who are responsible and not monsters, that you can't possibly imagine, you know what I mean? The kinds of horrors that young children might be subjected to. And when you have a client who then turns out to as an adult, do some things that are, show a lack of respect for the law, as a defense attorney, I could see that's where I sympathize with the defense attorneys. And I could see myself really kind of being interested in trying to lay a foundation for the notion that, simple ideas of culpability and right and wrong kind of break down when you start talking about people who were never given a chance from the word go.
Yeah.
To adopt, and I, if I may, even on a personal note here, I mean, I'll give you my prime example of that, like the sympathetic defendant, a classmate of mine. I don't know if you've heard this story, but
I think I know what you're going to talk about.
The murder of Jerry Granzol. If you know Jerry,
yeah.
And I mean, listen, he was a classmate of mine and went to high school with Sean and myself, for those listening. And he was murdered on a street in Philadelphia in front of his 2-year-old daughter and with his child in the car. And the kids were trying to carjack him, and he asked to please, he was completely cooperating, handed over the wallet,
handed over the wallet, said, yeah, take what you want.
Yeah, take what you want. Just let me get my daughter out of the car. And the kids took offense, and there was a short back and forth, and pop, the kids shot him in the face. And then they ran off. They didn't even take the car, in the end. Like they killed him for whatever was in the wallet. And I think they ditched the wallet around the corner. So I think they got, frankly, nothing. And my first reaction to that, and Jerry, I can't claim this was deeply personal in the sense that I hadn't seen Jerry since we graduated high school.
Yeah.
But my first reaction was certainly anger, just because anytime somebody that, he sat behind me in English, like I knew him for 4 years. He could be any of us, you feel this rage about it. And I remember asking myself the question, how could anyone do that? But then I realized that the answer is actually kind of straightforward. It's when you read about the kid who actually pulled the trigger and what his background was, the answer was that nobody ever taught him his life was valuable.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't think his life is valuable, he can't possibly conceive that anybody else's is either.
Yeah.
And that's the answer.
It's really a difficult piece because you can be uncomfortable with the outcome and you can despise the person and their actions.
Right.
But that doesn't absolve the conversation around how did this person get to the way that they are.
Right.
And that's not to say that they're not responsible for their actions, but
right.
You still as a society have to understand how people do what they do. There's a sociological sort of conversation that has to go around to try to fix these things instead of just, incarcerate, death penalty, and let's move on to the next. You still have a systematic problem that's creating these people that don't value life or don't understand their life has value. And I think you've put that really well. I like how you've represented that because that is what is happening. I mean, there's two things that have happened. Somebody doesn't look at life as valuable, i.e., they've shot somebody in the face, but they don't care about the consequences for their actions. There's an expectation they're going to get caught.
Right.
And there's an expectation that they're going to be in jail. And that's part of what their expectation is set for.
And so often the kids who do these types of things, their expectation is that eventually they're going to jail for something. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the problem. Whereas, to bring it back around to Michael Dunn is the exact opposite end of the scale. Michael Dunn has no excuse. Michael Dunn, is a reasonably, well-situated mid-40s man, relatively successful. I understood he had a job. He's, got everything going for him. And for some reason, he has this rage, and it seems very racially motivated, to be perfectly frank, towards kids that, not only in reality, am I sure if I were to look into where Michael Dunn lived and where he chose to live and how he chose to live his life, was he capable of sealing himself off? This is what money buys. It's the ability to control and pick your environment. And I'm sure to a large degree, he was able to control and pick his environment and not have to deal with that which he did not want to deal with. So, why did he have all this rage towards these people who, frankly, he doesn't have to deal with unless, occasionally, if he happens to pull into a gas station. And in a microcosm of that, as you've already pointed out, even in that situation, he could have stayed in his car, parked across the parking lot with the windows up, and he wouldn't have been bothered. He had all the power in the world to select and choose his environment to prevent the confrontation from it. Sure, it annoys you. There's all kinds of things that would annoy me if I stood right next to somebody and watched them while they were doing it.
Yeah.
But I don't have to stand next to them and watch them while they're doing it.
Yeah.
And he has no excuse.
And that for me is such an indictment on, you know, him personally, and everything he does following this is lamentable when you look at his behavior. And one of the things that really makes me quite comfortable with him, because I think my initial reaction to, there's a few things I was surprised that I found myself thinking. And the one thing the defense attorney did really well is he did you know, the whole evidence around bullet holes and whether the door was open or not, because I do think whether what he did is right or wrong, that does make a difference as to whether Jordan Davis is getting out of his car and walking towards the defendant. It does make a difference. It does. Now, I'm not talking about whether he goes to jail or not. Legally, it makes a difference. You know, if somebody's advancing
on a legal level, sure. On a moral, like, responsibility level, I don't think so, because you're still behind the wheel of your car. What you do is say, listen, I'm sorry, I'll just move. You know what I mean? Back down.
But you can let's make the argument that and there's a greater point to this, but I think this is an interesting point to raise anyway. The bullet holes that went into the side door of the car, and I don't quite understand this, because when you take a look at the bullet holes, and there was somebody in forensics that put sort of dowels through the holes to see where they went. And where they went pretty much lined up with a dummy that they showed that sort of matched, you know, with the door shut, the dowels went to where they expected it to go to make contact with Jordan. But the bullet impact was in sort of straight line, as if the door was open given his angle. And let's say, for argument's sake, that the door was open. And let's say, for argument's sake, that he says, I'm going to fucking kill you. And he gets out of his car and starts advancing. I don't know that. I'm not saying he made a right decision, and I don't agree with it, but I don't think that makes this a black and white case to the same degree as it was. I think when your life is at risk, you can make an argument that I had to make a decision. Should I wait for him to pull a knife out and stab me, or a handgun out of, you know, whatever prejudice he has, handgun out of his jacket and shoot me, or what should I do? Now,
you're behind the wheel of a car. You should put the car in gear and get out of there.
I understand that, but you're talking. So just to make the argument, I agree with you, by the way, but just to play devil's advocate, my life is under threat. I'm scared, and I have seconds to react. You are not in that position and thinking about it from hindsight. So there's a differentiation there, and a good defense attorney could make an argument that he was under threat. Somebody was coming at him. He protected his life. The kid said, I'm going to kill you. What should he do? You know, of course,
he should not have a gun in the glove compartment of his car. I know it's legal, but you shouldn't do it. Yeah. I mean, honestly, because it's going to tempt you to use it instead of finding another way out of the situation. Yeah. And that's B, he should, you know, certainly be looking for a nonviolent way, and even see if he can't find one, or his first reaction is to pull the gun. You know, police officers aren't trained to just turn around and fire. You know, now you've pulled a gun. Okay, stop right there, halt, or I'll shoot, or some kind of indication. You know, say something, anything. Instead, he just turns around and fires 3 bullets in his own testimony. And then he fires 3 completely gratuitous ones more.
Yeah.
I have no sympathy for Michael Dunn. I have less than no sympathy for Michael Dunn.
So this conversation, this point I'm raising is more of a I want to say thought experiment, because I agree with everything you're saying. However, I think there is some differentiation that could be made for the level of culpability based on whether he is being somebody is being an aggressor. Now, you would then, as a prosecutor, somebody who's managing this case, would then question, well, how did this whole thing precipitate where somebody threatens to kill you? Were you polite to them? What was the conversation, or were you agitating the situation? But that still doesn't change the fact that given the law, if somebody, I think, and this is my perception as a non-lawyer, non-legal entity, if he is coming after him and he shoots Jordan Davis, I think this changes, the 90 years in prison. I think we're looking at 15.
I mean, if you're simply talking about, what would be the legal ramifications of Jordan having gotten out of the car, and if you could prove that he was moving in some kind of threatening way.
Yeah.
Well, this is the whole situation that was developed in Florida. And that, again, without talking about the Trayvon Martin case, that George Zimmerman, arguably was in a. I mean, first of all, I think the part of the problem is, I mean, you're kind of stating a hypothetical, because I think that the truth of the matter is, I think it's sufficiently proved beyond a reasonable doubt, and certainly for my, purposes, that Michael Dunn is a liar, and that none of what he says happened. And so we're now in the purely hypothetical. So rather than talk about the purely hypothetical, I would talk about more like a George Zimmerman case, where there was definitely a physical confrontation that happened, there. I mean, and that is exactly the law on which he was dismissed. The stand where his case was, where he was not exonerated, but he was found not guilty of the top charge because of this stand your ground rule or law that basically makes it so that anybody postures towards you and here's why that rule is bad, because it automatically privileges a gun owner, right? Because essentially what it does is that anybody postures towards you, you can shoot them.
Yeah.
If you happen to have a gun.
Yeah.
Which first and foremost is itself, I mean, it privileges a gun owner, and guns are not, I mean, I know you can get a gun cheaper than I would like, but guns are not, like if you're a poor or a working class person who has spent their money wisely, a gun is not a necessary item to your existence. You should be, a gun is more like a luxury item, and therefore you should not, unless we really want to run the wild fucking West in the United States, where it becomes necessary, because without it, don't expect the law to help, you don't expect police to help, you don't expect,
And that narrative in that view of America is a very weird one to me. But I'm gonna sort of dovetail two different points here. And I think going back to what I was saying, it was more the defense that to me was the most compelling defense as to whether the door was open or closed as far as impact. Now, I'm not talking about whether he should or shouldn't be in jail. I'm just saying that was the most compelling argument that they were making as to whether the door was opened or closed.
It's still not, I'm going to tell you why it's not even that compelling, even if the door is open. And here it is, because the bullets went through the goddamn door, which means he was still, if you were in a position to be able to turn around and fire through the door, if the door is still between you and him, it means you have time instead to start your car and get out of there. So like, I don't even think, like, if I'm on the jury, I think it's an academic question that has no consequence.
Well, being the best argument doesn't mean it's one that's going to let, I'm just saying that was the best possible argument they could make to sow some seed of doubt in the jury as to whether his life was actually under threat, and whether that door was open or not is a key question. Because if that door is shut, if he never leaves that door, there is no physical threat to him. There's no gun. There's nothing that they can say. And that was the only close to compelling argument they had. But
I don't disagree. If your point is that this is the best card the defense attorney had to play.
That's exactly the point. Yeah.
I think that's right. But I don't think sorry.
To kind of connect to what you're saying, and I completely agree with your view on gun ownership as far as so my view, if we take a look at the whole Good Samaritan thing, and there's countries that have a high per capita gun ownership
Canada for one, in fact,
and they're not shooting the shit out of people. And I think
they are not.
When you look, and I even saw this, I was looking up statistics for gun ownership, and somebody referenced Israel as an example, because they have a lot of guns.
Well, everybody has to be in the army in Israel, right?
Well, not only that, to own a gun, the rules are quite strict as far as like the level of training you have to go through, even I think psychological profiles, classes, and even then, I don't think the laws allow you to have the same sort of Good Samaritan laws that you can take advantage of to protect yourself like they do in Florida. And this goes back to that point that I was discussing, I think, on our second episode, that, Navy SEALs are probably the best example of people who are trained in sort of combat and trained to, in that sort of setting to make those sort of decisions. And your point is spot on, because you're now empowering people that haven't had any psychological training, haven't had any situational training. And whatever training they've had has been solely how the gun works and how to not shoot yourself. Those are the decision makers to determine whether they are safe or not without that sort of training. And police, and goes back to why we have a lot of police shootings, because they're the ones who are not trained to the degree, let's say, a soldier's trained. And they're the ones that are more on the front line than any soldier in the U.S. right now, because they're A, up against a shit ton of guns, and B, they don't have the training to be able to make quick decisions with the gun they have.
I mean, training, I think, is certainly an issue. You know, people point out all the time in the United States that you need a license to. A person I ran for, as some of the listeners may know, because I think we've mentioned it before, that I ran for the State House of Representatives in Pennsylvania in 2018, and one of my fellows who did run and win her seat. She, at a joint appearance that we did, I'll never forget, she pointed out that her neighbor was having a yard sale. At the yard sale, he had a shotgun and a boat trailer. And you couldn't buy the boat trailer without first getting a license for the boat trailer. But the shotgun you could come up and buy and walk away. So, I mean, that is a problem. I agree. But, you know, actually, who did it? I'm sure you've probably seen the film, Michael Moore's 2002 film. And Michael Moore can be a controversial figure, to be sure, and I think sometimes you know, comes up with the point first and then tries to figure out his evidence later, which is always a problem. You know, he's certainly arguing with, you know, with an agenda, but I don't necessarily fault a filmmaker for having an agenda, but I think he can be guilty of bending evidence and ignoring relevant facts. But having said that, his 2002 film Bowling for Columbine, this is where I thought you were going, was actually, I thought, rather clever, because I thought it was going to be a screed about the need for more gun control laws and more gun control, more elimination of guns, et cetera, et cetera. But in fact, the point that he makes is the point that you just made about 25, 30 minutes into the film. And I remember being blown away by it, that, listen, Canada has, you know, as many guns, well, maybe not quite as many, but quite a high gun to person ratio. And yet Canadians aren't shooting each other. So what is the problem? And the film basically goes on to examine the thesis that the problem is the news coverage and media coverage of violence in the United States that has everybody tuned up like this all the time, that your safety's under attack. Things are happening to you. There's people lurking outside your door. Lock your door, lock your window. Someone's coming to get you all the time, every minute. And that what that does is, you know, if you put people psychologically on edge and then arm them, don't be surprised if, you know, even the slightest threat is perceived as a reason to pull that gun out and start firing. I don't think that's a terrible thesis, honestly. You know,
no, I think it's fair. I find interesting when I watched that film, I didn't like it in the end when I was younger, and I'm thinking about why I didn't like it, and a lot of it comes down to media, and how easy I was. And this is, you know, we've had to relearn how to take in media now, as you know, in this day and age. And this was at a time where, you know, you get a news report and you listen to it. This is the whole reason why anti-vaxxing kicked off, because reporters were saying, oh, the one doctor that cares about your child and autism, and everyone's like, shit, this guy's for real. And when you look, I remember that the one takeaway I had from the film that seemed to kill it for me, because I remember thinking, and this is Sean when I was 22, I remember thinking, yeah, you know, good film, really good points, Michael. And then at the end, the gratuitous laying the picture of the dead kids at Charlton Heston's house, or the people who were shot.
That's histrionic.
My takeaway from that wasn't correct now in hindsight. And I haven't thought about it until you raised this film. At that time, I remember seeing the NRA interviewing with Michael Moore saying, yeah, we, you know, at the time they were a little bit more loose and fast with their belief that there should be gun safety and gun control, which now they don't want gun control. Right. And they said, yeah, you know, these measures should help stop these sort of things. And my view at the time was, well, the NRA isn't responsible for that. You know, there's systems in place that aren't working. Why are we blaming the NRA for this? But in hindsight, you know, that there is an element of culpability there with, you know, their corporate connections and their self-interest to be able to maintain this you know, this existence they're in, and that fuels the fire.
Well, the NRA, like the Republican Party, has been hijacked by its most extreme wing. You know, there are lots of NRA members out there who, I don't know, were just sort of people who enjoyed shooting rifles for hunting and maybe even some target practice. And I don't begrudge, you know, listen, if you use your gun legally in your backyard and you want to shoot targets and pretend you're dirty hair, I mean, like, yeah, I don't get it, but go right ahead. You know, I mean, like, I understand people getting verklempt at the notion that the government's going to come in and stop, you know, something that they, first of all, people who have this kind of level of emotional attachment to all this stuff undoubtedly, you know, remember hunting trips with dad from when they were like, you know, 6 and 7. And so, you know, there is there is parts of it I understand. However, at the same time, I mean, like, at a certain point, there's a great Australian comedian. I'm sorry, I don't remember
Jim
his
Jeffries.
name.
Jim
Yeah,
Jeffries. I know this.
yes,
It's a brilliant bit because he's right. His whole thing
right.
was, don't take my guns. And he equated it to, I was really good at taking drugs, but Susie got high and killed her whole family and ruined it for everybody. And that was sort of the equation that he had. And he's like, it's not that you want to protect yourself. You just really like guns. That's why you don't want to get rid of them.
I don't understand why. I mean, listen, I've done a lot of thinking about this issue because I ran for office and I think I had to stake out a position. Did I say this on this here already about?
No, I've not actually heard your official political position on this.
Well, I tried this concept out with people, and it really was a hit when I brought it up. I said, listen, there's part of me that thinks, a real part of me, that gun clubs like the NRA are, in fact, they serve a good function. And what that function is this: guns are out there. People are going to buy them, collect them anyway. What you want is, like, my hobby, as you know, I like old computers. I have a bunch of old computers, Commodores and Ataris and things like that. But I don't care what your hobby is. My hobbies, and this is exactly how I would say it when I was on the campaign trail, whether it's old computers, I would, get a laugh out of fessing up to being an old computer geek, or whether it's, toy trains or collecting sports memorabilia and autographs or whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. Anybody who participates in a hobby community, if you really participated in it and maybe associate with others who do the same thing, everybody eventually meets the person who's a little too into the hobby, whatever it is. Yeah. The thing is, if they're a little too into it and it's, collecting sports autographs, you say, well, gee, like, you don't really have to, bump a kid out of the way to go get, LeBron James's autograph or whatever. But when it's guns, the person who's a little too into it winds up getting a hotel room in Las Vegas and shooting up a concert, or walking into Sandy Hook Elementary School and shooting a bunch of kindergartners. And the function that these gun clubs could play is the people most likely to know the person who's a little too into the hobby and could maybe flag it before that happens are the people that they associate with, right? So, like, if you're good, and like, that is the thing, like, we need to keep a good open line of communication, because I want the guy at the gun range who knows that the guy he sees there once a month is a little off and a little too into this whole thing. I want that guy to feel comfortable, like he's not a snitch, he's not a rat, he's not like a traitor to the cause. If he goes to the local police station and says, this guy, he may not have done anything illegal yet, but people better be keeping an eye on him because he's just too into this and he frightens me. You need that. You do need that. And that was always my official position. Now, having said that, I think reasonable controls, I mean, again, they can poll NRA people. This is what I mean by the NRA has been hijacked by its most right-wing members. Most NRA members are people who joined, familially years ago, and you poll even them, a majority of them think, like, what's the big deal? Run your federal ID, or run your state ID at a gun show, and your background's cleared or not. You make sure that nobody who shouldn't have a gun isn't having one. Universal background checks, and a couple other very minor things. The other thing I would always point out, I would like to point out to every gun owner, it's a famous statistic that you hear that, like, you're 57% more likely, a gun is 50% more likely to be used to kill someone or be used on somebody in the home as opposed to an intruder from outside the home. People get this with these fantasies of home protection. Yeah. And if you think about that statistic and then look at the statistics for, like, gun homicides, I remember looking for 1 year recently, 2017 or something, there was 20,000 gun homicides in the United States. Well, it occurred to me one day, well, okay, there was 20,000 gun deaths. How many of those were actual homicides? I shoot you. Like 11,000. Well, 11 from 20 is 9. What are the other 9? I know what the answer is. They're suicides.
Well, suicides are homicides, I thought, though.
They're homicides, but they're not prosecuted as homicides.
Okay,
you know,
so that's
right.
what I was sort of thinking when you were questioning.
Right.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
There's something like 9,000, and I would say and I actually finally heard an NPR piece where they kind of made this point, and I would love to make this point to every gun owner in America. Having a gun inside your home, you think maybe you're going to be the hero someday and prevent some home invasion. That's extraordinarily unlikely. It's also pretty unlikely, if you're a stable person, that you're going to decide to shoot your wife or kids. Fine. Or that your kid's going to decide to shoot you. But your depressed teenager who got dumped by their spouse their most recent main squeeze, who's going through that time in life, man. And they ran a story one day about a kid who actually said, yeah, I went into my dad's gun closet, and she didn't end up pulling the trigger, but they sat them down together and said, that the presence, Bill Shakespeare, good writer, he has a quote from King John, the play, how oft the means to do ill things makes ill things done. In other words, having the gun present, it's the easiest, fastest method of suicide. There's no pain involved. You pick up the gun, you put it to your head, it's over. You don't need pills. You don't have to jump off anything. You're not going to deal with the idea of like hanging or, cutting yourself. It's easy. It's quick. It is seductive for the person who is in that mode of thought. And it is far more likely that gun in your home is going to be used for that purpose than for any other. So before you own a gun, think about not, am I going to wind up shooting? Is one of your kids going to get a hold of that gun, either accidentally, which occasionally happens tragically, but much more likely on purpose when they're in that age range? Man, what a bad idea. What a bad idea. Sorry, I know it's a long-winded, but
no, I think it's really good, because I have a simplistic view. I had a conversation with somebody about, I found myself I'm not pro gun, but I found myself defending the ethos of why America has guns, or why a country has guns. Going back to the whole, protection element, for being able to form a militia, which is a bunch of bullshit now anyway, because, again, as Jim Jeffrey said, you're bringing a gun to a drone fight. But when you take
it's stupid. And not only that, I mean, the thing that people always ignore about that is like, oh, we need to be able to form a militia to protect our liberties. Do you think that the United States Constitution makes it somehow legal to rebel against the United States government? Of course it doesn't. It is one of the reasons that a state should be able to call a militia is to put down a rebellion of rebellious citizens. Their little rebellion fantasy is total and complete nonsense. No government anywhere ever in the history of the planet has legalized rebellion against itself, and the United States is no exception.
But I think when you take it back to a more simplistic level, I mean, you just take a look at simple, as they say over here, maths. If you increase the number of guns in the country, you are increasing the number of gun deaths that preventable gun deaths. It's just an inarguable mathematical situation. So you have to have some level of acceptance with this before you start to address the problem. Now, for me personally, I don't necessarily think that means that, there's an element here in the United States, and the one thing that the United States will pride itself on more than any other country is the ability to make decisions to protect yourself, and the ability to make that decision that you're responsible. And there's plenty of people out there that will have guns and will, they're going to be safe, and they go down the right routes to educate themselves to do so. But this is where you get into sort of that hazy area of, what does it actually mean to have these guns, and what do we need to do to keep people safe? I'm actually somebody who's perfectly fine with saying, you want to have a bazooka. Okay. Well, what sort of training and qualification and registration do we need to do to know that you're not going to shoot a bazooka at the White House? What are those sort of measures that we have to go through? It's no different than saying if you're allowed to buy a large jet, for example, that you can make an argument is just as dangerous as a bazooka, and you have to go through a shit ton of training to be permitted to take off in a jet plane, psychological profiles, and a shit ton of stuff. I mean,
the other two things I would say on this subject on the campaign trail, I never got any pushback on either one of them, is everybody recognizes that the Second Amendment of the United States is in fact not unlimited, and I can prove it because would you be okay, and almost nobody would be, with any random person owning a nuclear weapon? Of course not. So there's already an inherent. So now we've already established the principle. Now it's just a question of degree. The other thing I would say is, listen, I think one good thing. I mean, and I think it's a fair distinction that a lot of gun rights advocates and owners will say is that, well, listen, so many of these people were law-abiding citizens. If I wanted, how many of the gun homicides are committed with, illegal guns and guns that were purchased illegally, and they're already breaking the law. You know what I mean? So like, you're piling more and more regulations on people who are intending to follow the law. Somebody who's willing to break the law to murder is not going to be bothered by willing to break the law to acquire the gun in the first place. I understand that concept. And so therefore, I mean, I do think that some of the gun laws are well-meaning, but don't accomplish what they're set out to accomplish, because you're only going to limit people who are interested in legal ownership and don't have any nefarious intent. What I would say to that is like, my solution to that is the gun laws that would work, and I would pursue vigorously if I were to say the president of the United States or the governor of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. If we find that you sold or participated in the sale of an illegal sale, an unregistered sale of a gun to somebody, and then that gun is used in a homicide, you will be charged with murder. Yeah, because you are just as culpable, because that's the whole point of the suicide thing. Yeah. The difference between picking up a gun and clicking the trigger and doing that, it can be done in 2 seconds, versus any other method of suicide that requires much more effort. It's the same thing with murder. If I have to come up and stab you or strangle you, guns by their nature, not only do they make, more guns means more homicides, it also makes just the existence of a gun at all makes homicide easier and therefore more likely to occur. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, and that is, I think that is at the core of it is, I forget what point I was going to make, because it was along those lines of I think there's
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you didn't, because I was just trying to hold on to my thought, but I was really interested in what you were saying. But there is a bit of an internal struggle with the whole idea of, okay, let's make we agree on some level that people can be taught and registered and be made safe to have guns. But there has to be a conversation between any distinction you make between having guns and safety is going to mean more people are dying. That's something that we have to accept. Are we going to be a gun culture? Yes. Because you make that. Yeah, I know where I was going with this now. You make that sort of point that there are people that make a good argument that there are bad people out there with guns and I need to protect myself. And to be fair, if I was in America, it would actually cross my mind as somebody who doesn't have children to have a gun in my house because I live in America. I'm not saying I would do that, but it would cross my mind.
That's fair.
I'm just talking about what I would think about. It's something that if I lived in Florida, well, maybe, maybe. But if where was I going with this? This is my dementia's coming in now. So I live in the United Kingdom. And in the United Kingdom, I think I looked this up because I was really interested in gun data. As far as gun homicide data in other countries, because what drives me batty is people act like, this only works in America. We're safer in America and other countries are at risk. But when you look at the number of gun homicides in the United Kingdom, I think it was something like 32 in 2017.
Yeah, it's tiny.
It's minuscule. And not all of those are necessarily homicides. And getting a gun here, like just getting a shotgun here is fucking hard. You have to go through a few interviews with local police and, just to have something locked away. And, people that do hunting or sport hunting here, that's something you have to spend a shit ton of time, probably the same amount of time to get a pilot's license here. You have to go through to get a gun. But there's data in other countries to show that I am safer here. So for instance, if I go down the worst street in Birmingham, UK, now, granted, I'm 6'3" and 300 pounds, so I'm not a target. Like, if people want to kidnap me, they have to hire a van and get like a crew, because I'm not easy to move. Mm-hmm. But forgetting that, in this country, I was saying to somebody just the other day, I've been in places in Baltimore where I was genuinely nervous about my well-being. I have been in some of the worst places on foot because I didn't know any better in Birmingham and Manchester. I wasn't that worried. Somebody comes at me with a knife, I feel like I've got a chance. But in the US, it's like I was saying to Nick, if you were to say, Sean got shot, he was at a gas station before he dropped off the car in Florida. There's actually gas stations around the airport where people have died dropping off getting gas for their rental cars. It would be unlikely, but it wouldn't be the most shocking thing you've ever heard. Now, if that story happened in the UK, that would be front page news across the entire country, from Scotland to Wales to Northern Ireland to London.
Wow.
And there's a reason for that. So we need to have that conversation. Freedom, yeah, great. But what are the consequences of freedom? We are saying to have that level of freedom, we are removing the freedom of a percentage of people who are unlawfully killed. But there's also this element of we have to accept death. We have to accept death. We have to say that's okay to have that freedom to have a gun. There's no conversation outside of that. And I think if you can accept that, then we move forward.
Yeah, I mean that is it's civil liberties versus the health of the society, and this is something that
vaccines right now too. That's the same exact conversation.
Well, and although I was using health in a more figurative sense, and this is the literal one. I mean,
it's a very good analogy, actually.
It is. Of course, I would err on the side of. I have to admit, I guess I'm a statist, if you want to put it that way. I mean, I just think that the state has a right. That's what the state is for. The state, this libertarian fantasy that these people have of a world without a state. I would love to put them on an island and let them go Lord of the Flies and come back in 10 years and see exactly what's become of the place. The state is there to, I mean, people sometimes need someone to come in and say, you know what I mean? I really do believe that. And not everybody. Because the state could have all the gun laws at once. It's never going to affect me, not once, because I wouldn't purchase it. I can walk down. There's a gun shop within walking distance of this house. I could be there in 10 minutes, and I could have a revolver, I guess, in half an hour. I don't know what the current laws are in terms of background checks, but I would think, with the technology they have today, a lot of it could be instantaneous. So I could probably, and rifles, I don't think you need one in Pennsylvania. So I could probably walk out of there with a minimum with a rifle, come back here and shoot up the neighborhood if I felt like it, all within the space of a couple of hours. I don't think that's good. I really don't. And at the same time, like on the vaccine side, I also think that, the government has a right to sit there and tell you, you don't have as somebody once said, you're entitled to your own opinion. You're not entitled to your own facts. I forget which senator said that. That's a perfect way of putting this. Vaccines work. That's a fact. Tough shit. Sit down. Here it comes. It's
that liberty conversation that is fascinating to me, in the sense that when we look at, let's say, Lauren Boebert trying to rock up to Congress with a gun on her hip, it's this fantasy world of, in Texas, where you see these towns where people are walking around with ARs off of their, shoulder, as if this gives you some sense of safety. But this sort of gun Shangri-La to anybody else, like if you were to make a film, like let's say 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and you were to sort of transplant modern news footage of some of these towns in Texas where people are walking around, packing heat, like packing guns that can kill more than a hand grenade could in a single setting. It looks like a dystopian world, and people in other countries look at that and say, that's scary.
It is scary.
How do we know that this dude here with an AR has the psychological mentality to deal with something? This connects to, I was listening to with the what is this school in Florida that was the last
Parkland?
Yeah, Parkland, where they were interviewing it was actually on like 60 Minutes or something, and they were interviewing a Navy SEAL again, and going back to Navy SEAls, it's always it was a Marine, sorry. And they were asking the Marine, because this person was a Marine and was training special forces as far as combat and self-defense. So what if we gave security guards guns? That would have surely ended the shooting. And he said, well, no, most people who don't have the training to deal in that situation are probably not going to make the right decisions and either get themselves killed or get somebody else killed. He said, you're making a greater risk by giving yourself that sense of security. And it's a difficult debate to have. And it is this dystopian world. You may feel safe. That's fine. But you feel safe, people will die. And that's sort of the trade-off.
No, I think that's all very much on point. I think I remember hearing a piece of that interview, and I think that he was exactly correct. And, to bring it a little bit full circle, speaking of the NRA and the open carry, this is what I mean by them being taken over by the far extreme, even within which, you could consider the NRA is probably kind of a right-wing oriented group, even back in the good old days of Charlton Heston or before. Yeah. But now it's even more, it's been hijacked to be driven even further right. And, I knew that you knew that was happening back when I'm trying to remember exactly when it was, but Texas introduced that open carry law, and they liberalized the gun laws like they needed liberalizing in Texas even more. Yeah. And the NRA posted some video and or text saying to their members, we're celebrating this new law. The one thing we say is, of course, try to be considerate of people, if you don't need to carry the rifle into Taco Bell, you shouldn't just brandish it just for the heck of it. And people in their own organization jumped on them like they're a bunch of commie, liberal, lefty, pinko, socialists. Barack Obama's trying to take our guns away. They had to back off and be like, nope. Take the rifle wherever you want. What I mean? They're afraid of their own. They're afraid of their own membership. It's. I thought of something else in there too, but whatever. I'll let it go.
It's that libertarian fantasy that it even comes into play with healthcare. I mean, we're not talking even about vaccines, and this was an interesting one because Rand Paul. I mean, he's a piece of work in itself. And I'm actually registered independent right now. And I think I debated on going Democrat before just so I can make up the numbers when things were kind of weird over the last 4 years. And
you're denying your ability to vote in the primary in Pennsylvania. There's really no value in being registered as independent.
Yeah.
You should pick one or the other just so you have a primary vote.
I think I hated that idea conceptually. I hated there's a thing where I'm torn on the benefits of sort of a binary system, and there's detractors, and I think I've stayed out of that fight. So I feel like I have freedom to choose, but in a way I don't, because now I don't have a dog in any of those fights up until the point where I can vote.
Yes.
But putting that aside, we talk about national health care, and I am part of the NHS, the one of the greatest examples of nationalized healthcare. And I find it interesting that healthcare is being used as a sort of I don't know, almost like a Soviet style form of control, when in fact somebody had spoken to Rand Paul. I forget what was in the interview. It was really well done, where they pitched to him an idea where a group of people got together, pulled their resources to get the most affordable healthcare. And the guy he's like, yeah, that's exactly what we're thinking of doing. And he's like, well, that's what they do in nationalized healthcare. They pull their resources and people then get the best possible healthcare at the cheapest prices. This is why Britain's only paying barely anything for medication, and the same medication in the US is 100 times the cost. And it's looking at things as liberal or conservative ideas, and not about, fiscal ideas. Does it not make sense for everybody? Because even in Britain, I have private healthcare. I have very good private healthcare because I have a job. But if I didn't have a job, my hospital is not paying, the hundreds of thousands of dollars to cover the let's say this person shows up to get treated for cancer because they've never had healthcare.
Sure.
My hospital's not having to charge me more because this person paid fuck all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the least understood elements of the healthcare debate in this country is people seem like it's a binary choice, that there's either socialized medicine or not, or the, completely privatized, and there's no middle ground. And I don't know why. I mean, other than I think that there are some interests out there, namely private insurance interests that spend a lot of money trying to shape the debate and make people think in those binary terms, when it's just the same as school, right? There's the public school, and if you can afford it and you want to send your kid to private school, you can. I explain this to people, and a lot of the times when it comes up, people who aren't that educated on the issue are just astounded. They didn't like, oh wait, you can still have a private insurance company, and I'm like, yes, of course. It's not a question of whether or not you're going to eliminate all private insurance. I mean, private insurance don't want it because obviously a lot of people and a lot of companies, if they know that there is a public health insurance option, will simply stop carrying private insurance because you can go on the public insurance option. If I say to an employee, listen, instead of paying you $15 an hour, I could pay you $20 and you can just use the public health insurance option. A lot of people say, oh, well, why not? I'll take the cash, right? That's the That's what's going to happen. So the insurance companies stand to lose a lot of business, and that's where so much of this thing gets driven.
Yeah, it's well. I don't want to go too far down. I think we'll save this one for another time because this is really kind of
This was the Michael Dunn murder, right?
I think it connects because it does. At the end of the day, I think if we're going to summarize this, it is a question of liberties and who has the right to decide, how safe they are and how that impacts you. So in this case, Jordan Davis.
I mean, this is a way of putting it. The UK eliminated the death penalty. I don't know how long ago, right? In the United States, it is functionally. I mean, somebody got executed recently in one of the states, and it was the first one in a while. And it's basically petering out here. Pennsylvania hasn't executed anybody in I don't know how many years.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people who are still on death row, but it's obvious that they're not ever going to be executed at this point.
Yeah.
I do not sanction the state to execute somebody through a legal process. So I sure as shit don't sanction Michael Dunn. Self-defense is a legitimate thing. Yes. If I happen to have a gun and you happen to be coming with me the guy, but it had better be clear-cut, unambiguous,
And you have to make this decision up in 3 seconds.
I understand that. But you know what? The reality is, first of all, it's extraordinarily rare, that the circumstances meet one another. And, are there occasional legitimate cases of self-defense? Of course there are, but they are occasional. And it's just not worth, because the self-appointed vigilante syndrome is much more likely a thing to happen than legitimate self-defense.
I think for me, we talk about that being at a convenience store where he had his gun in his glove box and he was a concealed carry. He was somebody who was licensed to conceal carry. I'm less bothered about somebody who gets shot, and I'm not supporting this. So I want to be very careful with my words here. When I say less bothered, that doesn't mean I'm not bothered. I'm less bothered about somebody getting shot in the face, breaking into somebody's bedroom. I think there is a distinction there that can be made as sort of like as a first fallback point for me.
I'm not crazy about this. If someone's breaking into my window in the middle of the night and I have a gun and I shoot that motherfucker in the face, that's just too bad. Don't break into my. I mean, what do you expect? You know what I mean? Like a man's home is his castle. As long as the guns exist, or because whether it's a gun or if I just take a swing at the dude with a baseball bat before he's able to defend himself and I happen to kill him, that's just too. You shouldn't be breaking into somebody's house. I mean, there's no question about that. But
but we're talking at a gas station with loud music playing,
where there were other parking spaces.
Yeah, and then. And that's a big piece. And just to kind of, I guess, wrap up here, there was a lot of stuff that came out of this trial, which you should check out, which is all of the letters. They've documented all of the letters he sent during the trial and after the trial. And he is somebody who I hate to use "you are a racist" or "this person is a racist" because that is quite a broad label.
Not
this
me.
Person, if I were definably, well, I think people have prejudices and there's people that are racist. This person to me falls under the he is a racist in everything he wrote. He had a definite predilection towards black people bad, white people good. And part of that was probably inflamed by him being on trial for what he concedes or what he believes is the right thing to do. But he had a lot of time and a lot of information during this trial to take in, and he had to think about a lot of things internally about his decision making on that day. And after he was sentenced for 90 years, he said, let me read to you what he said, because I did save this here. And this
will be a good place to wrap up.
Yes. So he says, I lost it here because I was looking up something else. And that's kind of what I wanted to finish with was his apology, because I think this says everything. Oh, where is it? Sorry. This is a very professional show.
I'm sure he decided we need a producer as well.
I got it. Yeah, we do. We've got 3 subscribers and we need a producer.
We certainly do.
I want the Davis family to know that I truly regret what happened, said Dunn, who appeared in handcuffs and wearing a bright orange prison jumpsuit. I'm sorry for their loss, and if I could roll back time and do things differently, I would. I was in fear for my life and did what I thought I had to do. Still, I'm mortified I took a life, whether it was justified or not.
Yeah, there's no apology there. There's no admission there.
No. It's
First of all, he starts with the classic "I'm sorry for what happened." Notice the lack of a subject. Like I'm not sorry for what I did. I'm not sorry for that I shot your son.
Yeah,
I'm not sorry that I was drunk. No, I'm sorry that this happened. As if it happened from the ether, like with the passive voice. It just occurred. Jordan Davis was just sitting there, and then bullets were in him. I don't know how that happened. Fuck you, Michael Dunn. Like that would be my, that's
if I could roll back time and do things differently, I would. I.e., if I knew I was going to go to jail, I would have made a different decision. Mm-hmm. Or I think if I
would have killed all 4 of them and possibly a few more to eliminate witnesses.
I was in fear for my life, which is essentially says everything that your children have said is shit. Because I was in fear of my life, so I'm going to stick with that narrative.
Right. They're the liars, not me.
Yes. Still, I'm mortified I took a life. I believe that. Whether was justified or not. So whether it was justified or not. In other words, whether
he's only mortified he took the life because he's going to jail. If he weren't going to jail, he wouldn't be mortified. So I don't believe that either.
So what I'm going to do before we wrap here is I'm going to give you my perception of what was going through his mind. And what happened in reality.
Okay.
So this is and I'd be curious to hear your point of view. And I kind of wanted to do this. I thought this would be fun just to sort of portray what actually happened in his mind. So what he was thinking. Mm-hmm. He's had a few drinks. I think we agree to that. He pulls in. He hears the music that pisses him off. Mm-hmm. And he is fixing for a fight. Maybe not a fight, but he wants to make a point that he is a proud white man. And he's not going to handle this thug music. Mm-hmm. He rocks up. And he asks him to turn the music down. He's a little bit shit-faced. Turn the music back up, and he hears them swearing. He's a big dude. He's got a gun in his car. He's not going to back down, and he hears them swearing. He convinces himself that they have said, I'm going to fucking kill you. And in his mind, he thinks, you know what? I'm going to shoot at their car and put the fear of God into them. I am going to show them not to fuck with me. And I've had this gun here that I want to use. Now, this isn't him actually thinking that. He pulls the gun out. He shoots at the doors of the car and then shoots at the back of the car because his Dirty Harry comments tell me he likes film and TV. And he thinks if I shoot at the car, it won't hit them. If you look at where he hits them in the car, he doesn't hit the windows. He doesn't hit up by their head, neck, face. He hits sort of on the side of the car and in the back. So he thinks cars stop bullets because, well, I've watched Lethal Weapon. He then drives off, realizing shit went down, and I've had a few drinks. And he's not worried about the car or the kids. He's worried about a DUI at this stage, in my view. He says, let's get out of here. Shit got real. Goes back to the hotel. He's the one that suggests to his partner, why don't we get you a pizza? Because clearly you're stressed because you're hungry, not because my husband has just shot at somebody. And then the next day when he found out the kid died, his whole narrative was thrown on its head. And that's when he started to invent these stories about barrels and guns coming out on the drive. That's my actual take on what happened.
I think that's pretty good. I think I agree with most of it. I think I would make one point of information. I think you said this, but just to emphasize that he rolled into that gas station, heard that music, and he made a conscious decision about where to park.
Yes.
He said, I am going to sit, like, I'm not backing down. Like, they think they own this space. I'm a white man. I'm going to show them I own this space.
Yeah.
Right. And I think you're right. I don't think he intended to kill anybody. I think he thought doors are magic. I don't think he really thought he saw a barrel. I think not in the moment. I think that was an aftermarket invention. I think perhaps slightly different from you, that it probably started to occur to him the night before that this was really dumb when he told his wife, and then rather than her getting down, like, really, honey? Oh, my big, strong man. Can I get down on my knees and suck your, there instead? She's like, okay. Gee. And then she even said she thought she was going to get a visit from the cops.
Yeah.
I think her reaction probably told him, wait a minute, maybe I'm not the big, bad motherfucker I think I am.
Can I add a little bit of info to that from the trial, which you didn't hear? Yeah. When they got back to the hotel, he took the dog out to go potty. I fucking hate you kept saying that. She waited in there was the hotel had these sort of sitting areas, with the glass in the middle and where all the rooms are. While he walked the dog, she waited there waiting for the police to show up. So she was preparing for them to actually rock up. She wasn't like thinking they're coming. She was planning for them to show
I know.
up.
She had said that she was sitting by the elevators in her interview. So, I do think that that it probably was dawning on him the night before. And other than that, I think that we're basically in agreement that it slowly started to, the wheels started turning. Then of course, when we woke up the next morning and found out the kid was dead, that he was in some serious shit.
Fucked.
And that maybe his little act the night before wasn't so hot. But bottom line is, yes, he's a racist who got drunk, picked a fight, picked a stupid fight, and did stupid things, and is now living a stupid life, deservedly so.
Yeah. Well, thankfully he is away and he will never be out. And I think I really enjoyed this. And for anybody watching this, we still have to pick another case. I'm going to be on vacation or holiday, depending on what side of the pond you are on for the next week. So what I might do is Andrew, I might release sort of the tail end of this because I think it would be interesting for people to hear what our verdict was at the end. But if you've enjoyed this, we are looking at tackling a bit more of a niche area right now. See how we get on. We both love true crime. If you love true crime, please subscribe and join us for these conversations. We are going to be watching interrogations. We're going to be talking about these court cases, these really famous cases, and we'd like to hear your take on it. And I think at the end of the day, I want to really sort of dig these apart and really understand what happened. So yeah, please do like and subscribe. Andrew, anything before we go?
Not tonight. Have a good night, everybody.
Yeah. Well, thanks everybody. Good night. And we will catch up with you soon. Take care.